We are recording.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's October 18th Contributor Experience Meeting. Whoever said they hadn't seen me in so long, that was Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah.
My beard is nothing like yours. So let's go ahead and get started. I think the first thing on the agenda actually is Paris and the contributor letter and mentoring program that you're working on. I know I sent out the survey to our team, but maybe she can describe it a little bit more detail and talk about the program a bit.
Yes, and I actually wanted to do the survey as another bullet, and I just completely neglected that, so I apologize. So first things first, SIGDocs actually is starting the personas. If folks do not know or have not heard about that on the call, really quick, they're going to be taking a new docs approach for Kubernetes.io and having the individual pick a user persona. Some of those user personas include things like platform development, ecosystem developer, code contributor, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure, which is really cool, especially as a cool way of viewing all of these complex docs. And then also I'm starting to pilot some ideas around group mentoring and some untraditional mentoring paths as a way to help our contributor funnel. As everybody knows on the call, we have this humongous first level of new contributor, drive-by contributor, but then very obviously small at the top with owners and maintainers. So essentially just trying to help that like in the middle. So we decided to go in together on a survey, which we have about 100 results right now, extremely thoughtful results too, which is awesome for us to, once we do kind of an executive summary. Some of the questions on the survey, which I'll post in a second after I stop rambling, it has to do with things like what part of the process is exactly broken in your eyes, in your opinion. Lots of opinions, which is good because it'll help us identify some exact holes and gaps instead of these general terms that we hear a lot. Like, for instance, communication broken. I'm sure everybody on the call has heard that at some point. It's like, well, what about the communication's broken? And a lot of these thoughtful comments have included that information. So I'll do an executive summary in a few days with that, but the deal is we'd really like to get to 150 because that will show a little bit of a sample size as it correlates to the current very active members of the community. So I'll post that in there in a second. But then really quickly to go to the next stage, which is the actual mentoring piece. I am going to post this in the guide right now. I mean, in the agenda. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I just posted that in the agenda. What I posted was my notes. And this is kicking off the goal setting, the purpose, the scope. I'm also going to share it with Kubernetes working group contribx at googlegroups.com. So really quickly, the scope of this project, again, is not necessarily to start with focusing on new contributors. This is to be focusing on folks who need to and should be contributing up the ladder so that we can handle these reviewer roles a little bit better. And what I mean by handle is getting more of. Obviously, everybody here knows that we have hundreds of PRs and issues that need to be looked at. So if we have more reviewers in those roles, and obviously we'll be able to kind of crush those PRs and things a little bit faster, which ultimately, going back to what we said before, which we hear a lot, which is communication is broken. Communication's broken because obviously these folks are human and don't just have the natural time to review every single PR that's coming in. But if we get more folks, that will hopefully alleviate some of that and some of those challenges. So what I shared with you is super raw, so I apologize. There's tons of comments on this. In the next session, which is in 2 weeks, I plan to have a deck together to present on something a little bit more serious, and then ideally, hopefully, kick off a pilot at some point in November, December. And not to rant too far ahead, but again, looking at the idea and the concept of group mentoring versus one-on-one mentoring. Oh wow, my light just went out. And what I mean by that is, I think everybody on the call is really familiar with standard grassroots one-on-one coaching mentoring, which takes time. And that's what we hear all the time from people who say they don't want to be mentors is, I just don't have the time right now. So group mentoring in a very class-based session where people will graduate into these roles, I think is a really good response for us. And I did start what a workflow / process would look like there, and that is on the doc that I shared as well. Again, super raw. I started the process doc yesterday, so you'll definitely see the rawness of these docs. But does anybody have any questions, like very high-level questions about mentoring?
Do we have do we know other projects that have done this before us?
Yes. So I have been largely doing inspiration from OpenStack. They have an awesome upstream institute. Also, there is, hold on one second, I'm scrolling through the doc right now. On the doc, there's research / people to contact. That's where I've gotten a lot of this heavy inspiration from. Like exorcism.io has a really cool mentoring program as well that talks about this group mentoring. I also, when I was living in Baltimore City, non-open source project related, but had to do with mentoring youth in Baltimore City. They did a mentoring family approach that that stuck with me for it stuck with me for a lifetime, and it really works. And I think group mentoring might be the way to go here to help alleviate some of the time constraints that we have here. But OpenStack with the Upstream Institute, they don't necessarily do group per se, but they have classes and things where groups take those classes. So again, modeling off of all of this kind of inspiration into what would work for Kubernetes and what would work for us.
So just to contrast with some of the existing efforts that are out there, I think George is working on Kubernetes office hours. That's more directed though at people using Kubernetes, is that correct? And this is going to be something very similar, maybe with more targeted courses, or classes or topics, but directed at people writing and contributing to the project.
Correct, and this I'm imagining is a 3-month program. OpenStax is actually 6 months. So and I say 3 months because if you're a member currently, you need to be in good standing for 3 months to be a reviewer. I mean, at least 3 months. So that's where the 3 months came from. And like I said, our next session, I'll put together a deck so we can go through a lot of these details that I'm ironing out. And so then, we can definitely get some detailed feedback there. But then also long-term goals would be for us to scale this program to multiple user stories. I mean, I'm just using the user story right now that is, I'm currently a member and I'd like to proceed through the ladder. Other user stories are, hey, I'm a fresh contributor. I have no idea where to start. The other user story is I have done one contribution and I'd like to become a member. All of those, we can probably talk about 9 different user stories, but this is just very, very, very focused on the initial problems, which again are communication and things that have been brought up in the survey that I'll do the executive summary on. And
so one quick comment, I heard you mention a few user stories there that were all driven by the mentee.
Yep.
I think it's important that we capture some of the benefits that the mentors gain from this as well.
Yep. Definitely. And I'll have that in my deck. I mean, the mentors, I mean, especially these first batches of mentors, they have to be on the contributor ladder currently. I mean, we can't have like a new contributor mentoring someone that's going to reviewer state. So these essentially, my idea is that our current committee, as well as owners and maintainers, would be nominating at least 20 people that would be mentoring. And of course, these people would have to volunteer. This is not, we're not looking for we're not looking for forced mentors here. We're looking for people who want to, but also people who are, in a kind of like a nominated fashion because people trust them already. I think building trust within this community of of owners, maintainers, approvers, et cetera, is probably one of our hardest challenges. So it would be great to get their buy-in here of A, is this program going to work for them? And B, who do they think should be leading this from a mentor perspective? But I mean, long-term goal, like I said, is to have a multi-tiered plan here. And that would include things like upstream office hours, similar to what George is doing, but from kind of like a different lens, contributor workshops, and things like that, like different ways of viewing mentoring that aren't necessarily mentoring. So
I have a question.
Yep.
I have a question. So is this program somehow related to Google Summer of Code? And if not, are we going to like make them, somehow connected to each other? Because I know we've been successful with Google Summer of Code for Kubernetes some time ago.
I mean, that's really focused on new contributors. So, but yes, I'm actually taking a lot of what they also do on the best practice side for mentors, meaning the actual process and engagement of said mentors. I have been talking to Josh Simmons on the Google side, and also Nikita. I'm not sure if she's on the call, but Nikita is one of our former Google Summer of Code interns who was working on Kubernetes. So she does have that insight as well. And she's helping me with the actual pieces of their mentorship pie. So yes and no, Eeyore.
Okay.
Another question is, how would you like us to get involved? What additional resources do you need? What's the timeline? Any of those things?
TBA on a lot of that. I'm working today and tomorrow on this pretty much solely, and next session I plan to have much more of like what we need help with and where we need help. On the no, let me take a step back. On the doc, there's a requirements / questions / process needed tab, if you will, on the spreadsheet. And some of that stuff I actually do need some help with, especially like doc creation, updates needed for current docs. For instance, we need to do a mentor training guide, a mentee training guide, the rewards and recognition strategy, all of which are kind of drafted at the moment, but I definitely need some help with. So if you want to help me with any of that stuff that's on that list, please definitely reach out to me. Or if you want, just add your name in the owner list and I'll see it and I'll ping you separately. But timeline, like I said, I'd really like to get just a very beta pilot out with a small group of people to see if this is even going to work. And then iterate from there by the end of the year. I mean, hopefully by KubeCon, so we can kind of get the word out at KubeCon that this is a thing and that we want to proceed with it as a, proceed with some kind of stable version instead of a pilot by KubeCon. But the quicker that I can get some of these docs created, the quicker we can do a pilot.
So can I vote for pilot as the name for? Because I think
right to the bike shedding.
Yeah,
like,
why not?
I feel like if this covers like kind of the people who've been around a while, and I've kind of got the users handled with office hours, and then we find a place for new contributors. Those are three areas where we could really make a difference, other than it taking a lot of effort, right? Like you can like you almost have to do this full time while I do users full time, right?
Yeah. Totally, 100%.
But I think it's worth it. I think.
I mean, ideally, I mean, we would want this to scale, and so I'm trying very hard to make it system scalable and not human scalable, because one of the principles that guides me in my life in general is that humans don't scale, systems do. So, and that's why I think the mentoring programs have failed. Many fail because of that reason, and people always kind of rely on this one-on-one mentoring principle, and that just does not scale. I mean, and you guys can see that Kubernetes is freaking huge. So that like one-on-one approach would just never scale here. So definitely if anybody wants to help, ping me offline and I can get you plugged in somewhere. And pilots, I would definitely like to run that by a marketing professional. But I'm on board with it. I'm on board. So no, I'm not the blocker whatsoever. But definitely want to run that by a marketing professional, because we should do a full marketing blast on something that's cool. Tugboat. Thanks, Josh. All right. I think I'm done with the rant here for mentoring.
Just a brief heads up. I'd like to say that we at CNCF completely support this initiative. We've been thinking about it like in the long term. But you have already launched it, so we will completely support you with that.
Awesome.
I'm really appreciated that this initiative has started.
Thanks, CNCF. All right. Am I the next one too?
Are you the master guide?
Yeah. All right. So this kind of also works into this puzzle of contributor experience, because I hear all of the time, like, where do I start and how do I start? And that there are literally like 4 contributor guides already nested within the GitHub community repo. So this is essentially just a push to get it to kubernetes.io. And this also, again, falls in line with the user personas for docs for code contributor. And what I'm doing is an analysis piece first. And what I'm doing is George actually helped me with some of this research, and I do need some help with the rest of the research, but comparing it against other popular open source projects that are known to have good contributor onboarding docs. For instance, Node.js is known for having decent docs for upstream. OpenStack is known for having good docs upstream. Debian is known for having good docs for upstream. But if anybody on the call wants to help with some of this research, we're just literally line by lining it to see where our holes are and where we have room for growth, and then making either new docs against that or updating the docs that we currently have. Some of the docs that we currently have 404s in them. So just making sure that all of this is a very smooth process for the contributor, and then ultimately, again, getting it back on kubernetes.io, where it should be housed with the rest of the documentation and not necessarily embedded within GitHub. But if anybody on the call wants to help with some of that research, it's definitely well needed. I'm actually going to put in the analysis spread that I have right now in the doc.
Yeah, I've been looking for. I'm in Google. I've been looking for it, and I can't find it.
Oh, George, will you put it in there for me?
I am in Google Docs hell. As soon as I find it, I'll look.
Me too. That's what I'm like, oh no. All right. Yeah, and George did a wonderful job on the OpenStack piece, since he's very and has been very close with those docs, so he already knew. But if there's anybody on the call that is very familiar with the Node.js docs, as well as Debian or another project that you think has superior upstream contributor docs, then we can do that as well.
So I just want to mention, so that we don't have too many duplicate efforts, I think Paul Morey from Red Hat maybe also was working on something similar. He opened up an issue a few months ago about contributing to Kubernetes and making sure that people are clear on the conventions and just a general guide. And that his issue has seen a lot of discussion. So I added that in there, and I think he's working on it as well. So just want to make sure that you collaborate if you are going to continue.
And we are. There is a ton of discussion if everybody wants to read that issue, but a lot of what he's talking about is going into a developer's guide. And I'm working on more of the contributor guide, which the developer guide is a part of. And Paul and also Ryan, I can't remember Ryan's name. I'm sorry off the top of my head. I'll look. Ryan from Red Hat as well. They're going to be
Jarvinen.
Thank you. They're going to be working very heavily on the developer guide piece, which has a lot to do with the API conventions and which would also include the how to build on top of Kubernetes. And whereas my concern is mostly with upstream. So that's how we're kind of splitting up this work, is sort of upstream and then dev guide. So contributor guide and dev guide, but dev guide will obviously be also nested within this contributor guide piece. Gosh, it's light.
I guess it's the same piece. I think Andrew Chen is leading.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Andrew's doing some of the work as well from the doc side.
Yep, and we're all working together on that. I do need to update that issue too with the analysis doc. So when I get off this call, I have some action items.
And I think this is going to be something that's very cross-cutting for SIGs too. It's probably going to be important to talk to the leads from a lot of the core SIGs, Node, API machinery, to get an understanding of what they expect for people contributing to their areas. I was actually talking to Phil Whitrock, who works on kubectl, but a lot of server-related things as well. And I think he started an incubator project kind of aimed at helping to solve some of the API convention issues when people start contributing. I have myself have not extended the API or written any kind of controller, but Phil created an incubator project called Cube API Machinery Builder, I think, and I'll add the link. But the idea is it's a tool to help people that are looking to contribute to the project to do some of the code generation for them, so it becomes a lot easier to contribute things.
I think it's API Server Builder, and he's demoing that at the community meeting tomorrow.
Oh, that's sweet.
Well, that was convenient. I think it's tools like that are things that we are going to want to include in that and make sure that we include in the contributor guide.
Definitely.
So I just wanted to call that out. Though it's not going to be purely about, or I'm hoping it's not purely about documentation, and also includes other tips and tricks along the way for getting started contributing.
And on that same tip with SIGs and contributing, one of the things that I need to reach out to all SIG leads for, especially as part of this mentoring piece, is that all SIG should have a contributing.md file in the repo. Right now, we only have SIG CLI and also multi-cluster that have contributor guides. Just a very basic, like when our meeting is, what we do, why we do it, how to actually get started. For instance, I know some of the SIGs have different up ramps and different guides and different instructions on how to contribute or why to contribute. So it's mandatory though, once we kick off this mentoring piece, that every SIG has one of those. So I'm trying to also figure out how to get every SIG on board with doing that. And of course, using the correct labels, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But that's definitely a piece that we need to drive, I think, is getting every single SIG to have a contributor doc, like CLI and multi-cluster. And I'll put in the agenda too, what CLIs and multi-clusters look like. I'll get a link to that.
Yeah, so I just happened to be in the SIG governance today, and I think part of the reason is in the instructions on creating a SIG and what a SIG should be, I don't think it mentions a contributing.md at all.
It doesn't. This was something that I think Phil started when he started SIG CLI, and it's an awesome guide. But as far as requiring all SIGs to have a thing, there's a sigs.yaml file where we sort of tried to enforce at a minimum that all of the readmes for all of the SIGs are generated by this file. And it includes like, who are the SIG leads, what's your weekly meeting, what's your Slack channel, where's your agenda, all of that stuff. And so I think what's your purpose, what's your mission? That stuff is mandated, but an actual like contributing.md file and a guide for how this particular SIG operates is not something that's been mandated thus far.
Yeah. Could we, and how can we can we mandate that? How can
I think you would start with a PR,
Yeah.
adding it, and then seeing what people think. And I think we'd have to provide them with like a template one, right?
Yep.
That's like, if you don't care that much, just use this.
And that's why I
If
think
you really care.
CLI and multi-cluster have done a really good job. So we could definitely use those as templates for right now.
Yeah, I can help you with that because I've been in that Markdown file a lot and know it a lot. So I'll follow up with you after, and we can.
Just speaking of contributing.md, personally, a good first step might be to refresh the contributing.md file in the main Kubernetes repo. It's pretty sparse and links to confusing, out-of-date stuff. So I would make sure if we're building an on-ramp that we would start there before because like to put contributing.md files in all of the SIG directories assumes that people know what a SIG is and why they should look at this particular SIG versus that particular SIG. So if we're talking about contributing.md grooming, that's where I would want to begin.
Yeah. And that's actually on the analysis too.
Yeah, good place to start, I think.
That I'll link there too. The analysis guide on one of the tabs has all of the locations of anywhere we talk about new contributors. So you'll see that it's a lengthy list that we have to update and or sunset some of that stuff. So I'll link that as soon as I get out of this Google Drive hell right now. And I've got like 45 tabs open.
Cool. Yeah, I'm super in favor of it linking elsewhere because contributing.md being at the root of Kubernetes means that only a select group of 7 or 8 approvers can actually approve changes to that. So if we can just change it to a link to the relevant place that more people can write to more quickly, we can iterate faster.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to stop talking now and somebody else can to talk.
Actually, contributing.md is pretty empty right now, the one that's in the main repo.
Yeah, it just tells you to go to the community contributing.
Does it still say it's a tough problem?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Really, it's
a big project, a big topic.
Yeah.
And the pull request link doesn't even go to the right pull request doc and stuff like that. So
all right,
pretty good.
Paris and I, maybe this week we can make that suck less because the one in Kubernetes/community is good. It just needs a little reorg and updating and stuff.
And there's a doc that's actually titled "Welcome New Contributors" in the same directory. That's decent, but does have some 404 links. Like I said, there's tons of these that are floating around where they need to be comboed and or sunsetted. So.
All right, George, can you take it as an action item to fix? Yeah, you already did. To fix that and make sure the links at least point to the right place, and make sure that the contributing docs are a little bit cleaner and more welcoming.
DevStats looks like it's next on the agenda. Is that you, Garrett?
Yeah, I just wanted to promote it one more time. I know that that it was talked about last time. They're still looking for feedback. I talked to Lucas kind of informally, just with email, but he asked that we file issues in the GH2DB maybe next Thursday. And I just want to make sure that everyone was aware of this. And
at this point, I don't know that this necessarily measures value, right? But if our contributor ladder, if mentorship is succeeding, we would expect this graph to go up and to the right in the same way that we expect the number of reviewers to go up and to the right. Sorry, I'm doing it the other way. It's mirrored for you guys. There we go. Up and to the right. Sadev, you're raising your hand.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for noticing. Yeah, I was just an observation. The values, how we measure it, right? So I know you mentioned, Aaron, that the LGTM, right, the label in a PR, and then approve label, right?
Right.
Now, I noticed that, there are PRs with, multiple LGTM, and that happens in many PRs because, somebody say LGTM and then,
Right.
For whatever reason, the test fails, right? Some formatting issues.
Right.
Sometime, one of the tests failed because on the GC something happened, something.
So what you are getting to is if these are actually correct, if they are bug free.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So if you care deeply about that, I would encourage you to go look at the actual queries that are driving these. And then if they look like they're generating false or buggy data, that we file issues against the GHA2TB repo. Because, I mean, that's something I too like to do, but I just don't know if I'm going to have the bandwidth to get to it. But I do think, like, inherently, there's probably bugs in how the data is collected. There's probably miscounting, there's probably double counting. There are a variety of ways that people can LGTM and approve. Should a /approve also be counted as an LGTM? Should an LGTM be counted as approve? I'm not sure. Just like based on the based on these graphs right now anyway, it looks like the number of approvers is not going up and to the right. So we're gonna have to do it to the left for me.
Yep.
Okay, so the other interesting graph for me anyway, this is the time before any comment or activity from somebody who is not an author. Again, I'm not sure if this is for issues and PRs, just issues, just PRs. I don't know if this includes or excludes bot activity. So those would all be good things to question for the fidelity of it. Of this data, but what I find interesting is, so the blue line here is 15th percentile, median, and 85th percentile, and they're all, relatively speaking, kind of staying the same. They are also not trending in what I would hope to be a downward direction, right? So in the 15th percentile case, you're likely to get a response on your issue or PR in less than an hour. But in the median case, it's somewhere between 8 to 16 hours. And then 85th percentile case, it's somewhere in the 5 days to 3 weeks range. Whatever we could do to improve time to first activity certainly seems like it would help in all of the cases. Okay. One other graph, if I can find it here. Oh, it's not open to merged. Apologies, maybe it's PRs merged. All right, I'll find the graph later. But essentially, there's a graph that sort of shows time from PR open to PR LGTM, time from LGTM to time approved, and time approved to time merged. Maybe it's this. Yeah, no. And the graph really clearly shows, I'm just not going to find it. Basically, the time for somebody to actually first look at a PR is the bulk of the reason a PR stays open and does not get merged. Once a PR has actually been looked at and gotten to LGTM phase, significantly less of the time is spent merging it. But so again, in terms of the contributor funnel or the contributor experience, it's how can we reduce the latency of that first response, that first look at the PR. That would really help us improve things. And then finally, to Garrett and Quentin's point about companies attempting to game things, right? I'm wondering if people are looking at dashboards like this, the company stats, which shows like how many active authors are there per company, right? So what username corresponds to what company here, that's what the Git DM repository is all about. There was one that I found was really interesting. Maybe it's company's velocity. Yeah, I think it's this one. Company's velocity I find to be the most interesting from measuring whether or not companies as a whole are trying to do meaningful things. If you want to look at whether or not people are gaming the system, so to speak, you might want to check this one out. Because this shows company activity and it breaks it down not just by pull requests, right? It also shows distinct authors of either issues or pull requests. It shows whether or not companies are filing issues. Do they care enough about Kubernetes to actively be engaged in filing issues? Do they care enough about Kubernetes to be creating pull requests? Okay, maybe this is the one that can easily be gained. Commits, maybe that's easily gained if you make a lot of tiny commits. Are they actively commenting on issues? I'm really interested in this one and how we could maybe go from this to some kind of metric that shows like, are companies actively involved in triaging issues, because a lot of non-code oriented work can be like shepherding the discussion, steering the discussion, realizing this problem's been solved over here, appropriately applying the right label to get it to the appropriate SIG. And that's all super valuable work that like our contributor ladder right now doesn't so much measure, because it talks about owners and code and PRs, right? But these are the sorts of metrics we can start to use to encourage that behavior. And so to the next point on the agenda, I'll stop sharing now. Quentin wants to measure contributor value so we can figure out, are people doing valuable things? And I want to be able to preemptively reward or acknowledge the good work that people are already doing. So I'm sure there are a number of people who have their hands up and who are willing to be mentors, but I personally, like, through some of the PRs I've seen, there are people I would want to nominate. And it would be really great if we could get to the point where we can use dashboards like this to find that list or group of people. Garrett, for example, I know you had talked about, what if we could create a tool that, given a GitHub user, you could just quickly see, like, what are all the pull requests they've done for Kubernetes? What's their activity been like that? Does this put them beyond a certain threshold where they look like, hey, they're really engaged and interested in Kubernetes? Should we reach out to them and, and acknowledge that, reward them, and then include them in candidacy for mentorship? So, okay, I'm pulling a Paris, and I'm done ranting now.
Yeah, I totally agree, Aaron. That makes a lot of sense, especially the suggestions you have around non-code contributions. A lot of the incentives and discussions around PRs created, lines of code written, lines of code modified, things that are super beneficial that pay down technical debt are equally, if not more important with the project. As far as the tool that you mentioned for identifying contributors early, it exists right now. The Summer of Code student that someone mentioned earlier, Nikita, had put it together. I think I'd seen it before and I ran it and it looks pretty great. The problem is it's a pull-based mechanism, so I need your GitHub ID already, and I need to know to look, and then I need to know what to look for. I would love something that had kind of alerting and monitoring that looked at people contributing to the project, used her tool kind of as the mechanism for getting their stats, and then, I don't know, send an email to Contribex or to a few leads or something saying, hey, this person should probably become a reviewer in this section. Because that would be more scalable. So it's something I'm thinking about, but I have not actively worked on as yet.
I have a question about the top graph, the GitHub activity. Is that like some magical number that GitHub takes the combinations of issues, comments, PRs, and comes up with that number, or?
I don't know the answer. So that might be something worth asking, like feedback in the repository for the Grafana front end is, how do we more clearly define what each of these metrics are, so someone like you can get that answer.
God, can't find my mute button. Yeah, so maybe you've already noticed this. There's a little like triangle in the top left-hand corner with an eye in it of all the graphs, and it's got a description. If that description isn't sufficient, that's where we would want to file an issue and ask Lucas to clarify. So that one's like all the events, right?
Found it, got it.
And also, for what it's worth, there's another one that I thought was kind of cool that shows like usage of bot commands over time, which SIG testing will be really interested in for us to understand like whether or not some of the things we're adding are actually being used and if people find them useful. We were also looking at implementing our own Prometheus metrics to sort of collect this as well. One of the things I'm interested in is it seems like this is probably not updated super rapidly. I'm going to see if I can get some clarity on what the update cycle is, because I think the GitHub event archive is only updated like maybe daily, something like that, or possibly hourly. But from our perspective, we're wondering, is this granular enough? This seems like granular enough for reporting, probably not granular enough for alerting. And I still haven't found that graph I'm talking about, but I will link it in chat when I find it.
All right. Let's see. Next on the agenda was syncing labels. I just wanted a quick update on that. I've looked at the tool. The tool is merged in test infra. I've run it a few times. It works. I rolled it out to test infra and community manually. I think the clusters for Munge GitHub and Prow, which is where I expect I'd want to run this tool, are both on 1.7 clusters, and I'm waiting for them to be updated to 1.8 because this is a regularly occurring job. Just a quick, and cron jobs come out with 1.8. That's the reason for waiting for 1.8. Just a refresh, this is the work that Aaron had done to, I think you manually curated the list of labels that are going to be propagated across all repos in the org. And this tool will make sure that they are synchronized. And so if we get a new SIG, we add that SIG label in one place and every repo gets that SIG label. And it makes sense to some extent for to have this kind of consistency across the project. This way, when you're in any of the repos, you kind of get a similar experience that it's all part of one organization. So that's what's going on there. I would look for that in the next couple of weeks. I'll follow up and send an email out when it's running. I sent an email out to Josh. I know your feedback was to get buy-in from SIG leads. I didn't have anyone reach out to me directly, but I mentioned the list of labels as well as the intention to roll this out. I'll send it out one more time before I actually do the rollout to see if anyone has any last-minute thoughts or suggestions there.
Yeah, and credit where credit's due. Lucas, the guy who wrote that all the fancy graphs that I was just showing, he wrote the label tool as well. I just looked through the list of labels. And my understanding is this is additive only, it's not subtractive, so people can still manually add their own labels to their own pet repositories if they so choose, but this is going to enforce SIG labels, 3-kind labels, and priority labels across all repos.
Yep.
And then there's the question of like, do we do it just in the Kubernetes org? Do we do it in the Kubernetes incubator org? Any of the other Kubernetes orgs? I don't know. These are all good questions that Garrett asked. And I'm catching up from vacation, so I haven't answered them yet, but thank you for sending that out.
No problem.
I'd vote for it in incubator just because then that's one less thing to worry about when a project graduates from incubator.
Oh, doing the incubator as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally doable too.
And even though a bunch of those labels won't be applicable for incubator, they don't have to use them until they are applicable.
Okay. The blog post? Who added Matt's blog post? I saw something about it. It's had to do with the pain of GitHub, right?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted a link here because he does make some valid points on pain points. I don't quite agree with his proposed solution, but I figured I would start a dialogue, make sure people are seeing it. Feels like if we did a better job, I think, just integrating things at the top level website, it would address a lot of these issues, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of some of the issues people are having.
I also want to make a comment that I think with everything that we've just discussed in the last 40 minutes, that a lot of his concerns are going to be alleviated. With better community page on Kubernetes.io that's more robust, and a better contributor guide on Kubernetes.io where we just have Kubernetes.io as a central point for a lot of things and a lot of hot links instead of using GitHub as a way for people to comb, to comb docs in general. I think a lot of that community concern would be taken away. Yeah, definitely not, obviously, GitHub and the monolith that is that, but at least from the contributor experience piece.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of gardening and pruning that could happen. So I think our efforts to create a brand new program means we're making a new space and we're going to populate it and we're going to say that's the authoritative space. This isn't the first time we've tried to do this. We've just always tried to do it in a new markdown file in GitHub, in this subfolder of this repo over here. What we tend to not do the best at as a community is act with the authority to say, and we're getting rid of the old stuff, for fear that somebody might care about the old stuff. And so we've left behind this trail of detritus that nobody knows whether it's valid or not. And I think the contributing.md linking to the wrong pull request thing, if you can point me to a single page that cogently explains all of the stuff for pull requests in Kubernetes, I will give you a cookie. And I think that anybody could come up with their own pet example for give me a single page that does X. So I agree that we're creating a new place where we're going to try and create that single page for a few personas. I just caution that we should make sure we are mindful to remove the old stuff and make sure we point to the new thing. But I also largely agree with like, I don't really want to go the OpenStack route of saying that Kubernetes is so unique and different that we're going to create all of our own project infrastructure, and we're not going to rely on third-party services that do certain aspects really well. We just kind of don't have the staff for that. If we, as a project, grow to the point where we do have the staff to support that, great. One example where we're there right now is there is no third-party CI service that can handle the volume of traffic and tests that we run. Ergo, we have our own CI solution that we have a team of people maintaining. We're not, but we don't have the staff to do that for each and everything. I'm glad that it works for Drupal, truly. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, it kind of leaves out a lot of our scale issues, Like I went through the Drupal site and thought, there's no way this could work for us. There's no way this could work for us. But I just wanted to get eyeballs on it because he's a contributor already. And I figured, he would know the pain. And maybe we can approach him at KubeCon or something and get more actionable feedback, I guess.
It's a lot of, for what it's worth, like it's a lot of pain I hear in areas surrounding Kubernetes as well, not just Kubernetes itself. So like one area that Matt Farina is trying to improve is the contributor experience around charts and applications that are built on top of Kubernetes. And I think Matt Butcher knows a little bit about that. So they're sort of trying to create a nice safe space for charts. But again, I want to make sure that nice safe space for charts is linked to this nice safe space that we're creating for the contributor guide. Okay, next up would be Outreachy. I think that's you, Paris.
Yes, we are doing Outreachy this semester. We're at least going to try it. We've missed a couple deadlines, and we went in last night during the witching hour, so we're not too sure if we're even going to get an intern, but damn it, we're trying. And let me link. I think, did I link it in there? Yes, the CLI link is in there. So Phil Whitrock is going to be hosting an intern for Outreachy. The Outreachy guidelines are on that link. It's pretty much someone that's getting paid by CNCF as a stipend to do work on our behalf as an intern capacity. It's mostly creating some commands and other Go-related tasks, if you will, that Phil drew up. And then Phil would be mentoring on a one-on-one scale. It's a really awesome program for underserved individuals within the community and will help us definitely improve in that area. So hopefully next time they kind of do it in semester formats. So the next one will kick off in, I think it's like March, April of next year. So hopefully next year we can get some more interest from other SIGs and maybe even people outside of Kubernetes core that might be interested in taking a Outreachy intern. The only deal is it is paid for ultimately by the CNCF, and we would have to get approval from them. I think that's what kind of took us the longest, is to figure out this whole payment strategy. Since the Outreachy program does pay their interns a stipend. But we are officially kicked off as of today and are in a recruiting cycle for said intern.
Awesome. Okay, with all of the 6 minutes that were over our originally scheduled end time, we can review our 1.9 Contribex goals. Or I don't know if people feel like we've sort of run 7 minutes over and we're kind of done for today.
I'd like to continue. Yeah, if we have the time. I mean, we don't meet often enough. Let's power through.
Okay, sure. Garrett, is this you? I'm actually not sure who's running this.
I am. I mean, I'm tech.
Go for it.
I can actually pass this to someone too, because I've got to drop in 3 minutes as well. Oh.
I also have to drop. That's the thing.
Okay.
Oh, and we can table it, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. Did Garrett drop too?
I think I would ask that if you have signed up for a thing to review whether or not you are aware that you're signed up for a thing, and possibly if there's like a GitHub issue that should be tracking that someplace. Adding links to GitHub issues always helps to be able to check status or like updating the stock by crossing stuff off if you've gotten it done. Garrett, you had mentioned something about waiting for the testing for cluster to upgrade to 1.8. Do you have an issue open for that?
No, I just talked to Cole about it, but I will open an issue if that's the best way to track that.
Yeah, just like I'm trying to get better about having us open issues for stuff that we're forecasting. So even if it's not something that has to get done today, just knowing that we have it on our plate. So like the kubernetes.github.io repo being renamed to website, right? That's something that like I think our munchers will just transparently support because GitHub's API is awesome and transparently redirects renames. But we'll want to follow that eventually.
Okay, sounds good. I will open an issue for that. I'll also take it as an action item to send out the 1.9 goals to everyone and also drive ownership, making sure that each of them have owners and owners are following up.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. See you guys on the mailing list. See you in a couple weeks.
Happy Wednesday.
Hey.
Bye, guys.